The doorbell rang, breaking the silence of LaFontaine. A man entered, his neatly groomed black hair and perfectly tailored suit accentuating his tall, imposing figure. Every step he took seemed to command the space around him. Adrian Lancaster, a familiar name, though not a pleasant one in the business world. Renowned, powerful, and with an air of disdain for everything around him. His gaze swept across the room full of customers, finally resting on Charlotte, causing her to freeze for a brief moment. "Who will be serving my table tonight?" His voice was deep, filling the space like a command. All eyes turned toward Charlotte, and she couldn't escape the weight of their attention. The manager hurriedly pointed toward her. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked forward. "I will be serving your table tonight, sir." Adrian didn't respond immediately, instead offering a faint, unreadable smile. "I hope you don't disappoint me." When faced with challenges that seem impossible to overcome, what will you do to stand tall and keep moving forward? If you believe that every challenge can be conquered, don't forget to hit the subscribe button now. And now, let's continue with today's story. Charlotte Evans slipped between the rows of tables, skillfully balancing the tray of wine in her hand. LaFontaine restaurant was bathed in warm golden light, with thick velvet curtains covering the windows, creating a luxurious and quiet atmosphere, separated from the noise of Raleigh at night. The smell of perfectly grilled steak blended with the scent of fine red wine, lingering in the air like a harmonious melody, captivating the diners. Charlotte placed the last glass of wine on a couple's table and quickly stepped back. Adjusting her apron, she didn't want to show her exhaustion, even though her back had begun to ache after hours of serving. She glanced towards the corner of the room, where a grand piano was being played by a hired musician. The pianist's fingers glided over the keys, creating a soft melody, but lacking emotion. She had once played better than this. Charlotte remembered the evenings when she would quietly sit at her old piano in her cramped apartment, letting music be her only escape from the pressures of life. She recalled the sensation of the notes intertwining, like a fire running through her veins. But now, that dream was tucked away in a corner of her mind, replaced by unpaid bills and overdue rent. The doorbell of the restaurant chimed. Charlotte was jolted back to the present. The atmosphere suddenly shifted as a new group of guests entered. A tall man stood at the doorway, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. His demeanor suggested that the whole world was a stage made just for him. And he was the only lead actor. Adrian Lancaster, a name everyone at LaFontaine knew well. He was a powerful businessman, the owner of several large companies, famous not only for his vast wealth but also for his arrogance, sharp wit, and love for belittling others. Those who had served Adrian knew one thing: he wasn't just a difficult customer, but he enjoyed challenging the staff, turning each meal into a mental test. Standing beside Adrian was a group of well-dressed attendants, looking busy even though they did nothing. An assistant quickly approached to remove his coat, while others muttered empty compliments. "I want the best table." Adrian's voice rang out, deep but commanding. The restaurant seemed to pause for a moment. The restaurant manager, a middle-aged man with a worried expression, hurried over. "Of course, Mr. Lancaster. Please, follow me." Charlotte watched from a distance, hoping he'd sit in an area she wouldn't have to serve. But fate wasn't that kind to her. When Adrian sat down, his eyes scanned the room, then stopped right on Charlotte. "Who will be serving my table tonight?" A brief silence. Then the manager turned to Charlotte and nodded. She bit her lip but quickly regained composure. "Welcome, Mr. Lancaster." She approached calmly. "I will be serving your table tonight." A smirk appeared on Adrian's face. The smile was not merely one of satisfaction, but also a subtle challenge. "Good." He leaned back in his chair, his voice slow and drawn out. "I hope you can do better than last time." Charlotte remained unshaken. She recalled their last encounter, an entire evening filled with unreasonable demands from Adrian just to test her reaction. She kept a professional smile. "I'll do my best." Adrian chuckled lightly, as if he had found a new amusement. He slowly scanned the menu but didn't actually read it. Instead, he picked up his glass, tapping his fingers lightly on the rim like a conductor testing the tempo. "What do you think I should order tonight, Charlotte?" A simple question. But Charlotte knew it wasn't simple at all. This was not about the food. This was a test. She took a small breath, keeping her voice smooth. "You could try the tomahawk steak. Cooked medium, served with a red wine sauce. Or, if you'd prefer something lighter, our lemon butter salmon is also excellent." Adrian tilted his head, his sharp gaze as if weighing each word she spoke. Then he let out a soft laugh. Half amused, half mocking. "Sounds good enough." He set the menu down. "I'll have the tomahawk steak. But," he paused, deliberately drawing it out, "I want you to choose the wine for me. And I'll be judging whether your selection is sophisticated enough." Charlotte knew this game well. She could pick a safe bottle, or she could take a risk and make a bold choice. She looked Adrian straight in the eye, not flinching. "I'll be right back with a suitable bottle of wine." Adrian just smiled. "I'm looking forward to seeing." Charlotte turned and walked away, silently preparing for the next challenge. What she didn't know was that this evening wasn't just another test, it was the beginning of a larger game, where her fate would be drawn into a whirlwind she never expected. Charlotte Evans was born and raised in a small town in South Carolina, where the cotton fields stretched endlessly under the summer sun. Life there was slow and peaceful but also full of limitations. Her family's wooden house sat humbly on the edge of town, with a roof of weathered shingles and a small garden where her mother often grew vegetables to save on living expenses. The Evans family wasn't wealthy, but they always had each other. Her father, a skilled mechanic, worked tirelessly every day to support the family. Her mother, a gentle yet strong woman, took care of Charlotte and her two siblings while also taking on sewing jobs to earn extra income. Despite the struggles, their home was always filled with laughter and the sound of the piano. The piano was the most valuable possession the Evans family owned. It had been passed down from Charlotte's grandmother, a talented pianist who never had the opportunity to shine on the big stage. When Charlotte was young, she would often sit at her grandmother's feet, captivated by the classical music flowing from her frail but expressive hands. Charlotte first touched the piano keys at the age of 4, with tiny fingers still clumsy. Her grandmother patiently guided her through each note. There were no formal lessons, no music teacher. Charlotte learned by listening and feeling, and she learned quickly. By the time she was 8, she could play Debussy's Clair de Lune in its entirety, so naturally and purely that it left her family in awe. The melodies she created were not only accurate, but full of emotion, as if music had become a part of her very soul. From then on, whenever she had free time, Charlotte would sit at the piano. It was where she could release all her worries, where she could forget the unpaid bills, the difficult days. Music was her world, her comfort, her hope. As Charlotte entered her teenage years, things became harder. Her father was injured in a work accident, preventing him from working as he once did. The financial burden fell heavily on her mother's shoulders, and Charlotte understood that she too needed to contribute. At 15, she took a part-time job at a small cafe to help support the family. The afternoons she once spent at the piano were now replaced with serving and cleaning tables. She still tried to practice, but the time grew shorter and shorter. Charlotte's dream of music didn't completely vanish, it was simply pushed into a corner. Waiting for the day it could be revived, she still secretly wrote down her own melodies in an old notebook. Unfinished compositions, much like her own life. When she graduated from high school, Charlotte was accepted into a prestigious music school in New York. It could have been the turning point of her life, but the tuition was too high, and her family couldn't afford it. She considered taking out loans, searching for scholarships, but in the end, she couldn't leave her family behind. Charlotte turned down the acceptance. She chose a more practical path, working to earn money, taking care of her family. And so, the dream of becoming a professional musician was set aside. 3 years ago, Charlotte moved to Raleigh in search of a new opportunity. She had hoped she could work and save money to one day study music. But reality wasn't as easy as she had imagined. She took various jobs: sales assistant, receptionist, and finally, as a waitress at LaFontaine. The job at this upscale restaurant provided better income, but it also meant dealing with demanding customers and long nights that left her exhausted. Still, every night after her shift, she returned to her small apartment and sat by her old electronic keyboard. A used one she had bought from a thrift store, though the sound couldn't compare to a real piano. At least it was still a part of her. Sometimes, Charlotte wondered if she would ever have the chance to pursue music again. Had she missed the boat on her dreams? But then she remembered the nights spent beside her grandmother, listening to the music echoing through their small house. She remembered the feeling of her fingers gliding over the keys, blending with the beat of her heart. Charlotte knew that, no matter how long it took, no matter how many obstacles she faced, she would never give up on that dream. She just didn't know when she would be able to make it a reality. LaFontaine was as bustling as usual that evening. The crystal chandeliers sparkled brightly against the high ceiling, their light reflecting in the glasses of deep red wine. Elegantly dressed guests laughed and talked, blending with the soothing music from the live band in the corner of the room. Charlotte moved gracefully between the tables, trying to do her job well without drawing attention. But then, a deep, authoritative voice broke through the peaceful flow. "Waitress, come here." Charlotte paused and looked up toward the voice. Adrian Lancaster, the wealthy and arrogant businessman, sat with his legs crossed at a VIP table, his fingers tapping leisurely on the surface. His sharp gaze locked onto her, and a mocking smile played on his lips. The people at Adrian's table were businessmen and notable figures in the financial world. They turned to look at Charlotte, curious but offering no friendly gesture. She gripped the serving tray tightly, trying to stay calm. "Yes, sir. How may I help you?" Adrian smirked. "I heard you humming a few melodies as you walked by." He tilted his head, a tone of amusement in his voice. "Seems like you play the piano, don't you?" Charlotte flinched slightly. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed her subconscious habit of humming melodies as she moved through the restaurant. "I only know a little," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. Adrian burst into laughter, a derisive sound. "Just a little?" He looked around the table, feigning regret. "How sad. I thought we had a talented artist here at the restaurant tonight." Laughter erupted around the table, mingling with the clinking of wine glasses. Charlotte felt her face flush with heat. "You know," Adrian continued, his tone sweet but teasing, "a real talent shouldn't hide it. A true artist wouldn't be afraid to perform in front of an audience." He gestured toward the grand piano at the center of the restaurant. "Why don't you show us a little of your talent?" Charlotte froze. A wave of panic rose in her chest. "I don't think this is a good idea." "Oh, come on," Adrian cut in, his tone sharper now. "Or maybe you're just the type who likes to boast but has nothing to back it up." Laughter roared again, louder this time. The other guests began to notice the commotion, their curious and entertained gazes turning toward Charlotte. She felt cornered. Adrian leaned back in his chair, took a sip of his wine, and raised an eyebrow, a challenge in his expression. "Or maybe you're afraid you'll ruin such a classy evening." Shame flooded Charlotte's chest. She could turn and walk away, but that would be admitting to Adrian's insult. She stared at him. Adrian wanted to see her fail. He wanted to make her the joke. But if she didn't step up, she would regret it forever. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte slowly set the serving tray down on a nearby table. "All right," she said, her voice no longer trembling. A strange silence enveloped the room as Charlotte walked toward the piano. Her fingers lightly touched the cold wood of the grand piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the beat of her heart. When was the last time she played the piano in front of an audience? She couldn't remember. But right now, it wasn't fear. Pride surged within her. She wouldn't let Adrian Lancaster determine her worth. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte placed her fingers on the keys. A note rang out, clear, strong. That silenced the entire room. Charlotte's fingers lightly brushed across the keys, beginning with the first notes of Clair de Lune. The sound echoed like moonlight falling on a lake, soft and delicate, yet filled with an alluring power. The entire restaurant fell into a rare silence. Every conversation, every clink of silverware on fine china, stopped. Charlotte immersed herself in her own world. The struggles, the mocking words, the humiliation from Adrian, all seemed to melt away in this moment. She was no longer just a waitress struggling with life. She was a true artist, letting the music tell her story. The gentle melody gradually built into climactic moments, like waves rising, then falling back, subtle and graceful. Her fingers danced across the keys, each touch full of life, each note brimming with her deepest emotions. The guests sat still, utterly captivated. The servers huddled in the corners, forgetting their duties. Even the kitchen staff peered out, drawn in by the magical music that filled the elegant space of LaFontaine. Adrian, who had sat smugly just moments before, now sat stiff. He had expected a clumsy, awkward performance, something to laugh at, but instead, he was pulled into Charlotte's world, in a way he couldn't control. And then, the music began to wind down. The final notes rang out, soft as the last breath of a beautiful dream. A moment of silence enveloped the room. Then, the entire place erupted. The applause was deafening, stretching long and filling every corner of the restaurant. Some guests even stood, cheering Charlotte as though they had witnessed the performance of a renowned artist. Others remained stunned, as if they couldn't believe that a mere waitress could create such magical music. Charlotte remained seated, her hands still on the piano keys. Her chest rose and fell, but not with anxiety, rather, with relief, knowing she had proven herself. She stood up, giving a slight bow, her eyes glowing in the chandelier's brilliant light. Adrian slowly stood as well, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though he were struggling with himself. A part of him wanted to acknowledge Charlotte's talent, but another part couldn't accept his own defeat. Finally, he smirked, lifting his glass. Not bad at all. His voice tried to sound nonchalant, but it couldn't hide his discomfort. I suppose you've practiced quite a lot to be able to put together a performance like that. Charlotte didn't show any anger or hurt. She simply looked at him with calm eyes, then slowly spoke. Everyone has a gift. What matters is how you choose to use it. A brief silence hung between them. The surrounding guests, who had heard Charlotte's words clearly, seemed to understand the deeper meaning behind her statement. Adrian raised an eyebrow but said nothing further. He merely returned to his seat, his eyes still on Charlotte, but no longer with the mocking gaze he had earlier. Charlotte quietly returned to her duties. But this time, she was no longer the shy, resigned waitress. She had proven her worth, and more importantly, she had reminded herself of the dream she had never let go of. Adrian sat still, holding his glass of wine, but not drinking. His usual arrogance had been shaken. The calm, mocking expression on his face had stiffened, as if his own game had betrayed him. The people seated around him, those who had eagerly awaited the moment when Charlotte would become the joke, now felt awkward. Some turned away, pretending to be busy with their food, while others sipped their wine, trying to hide their discomfort. The applause still echoed in their minds, like a slap against the cruelty they had unconsciously encouraged. One man sitting next to Adrian cleared his throat, trying to break the heavy silence. I didn't expect that. She really has talent. Adrian didn't respond. He placed his glass down and glanced at Charlotte, who was hastily leaving the piano to return to her duties. Once Charlotte left her temporary stage, her colleagues quickly surrounded her. Oh my gosh, Charlotte, you've been hiding your talent. I had no idea you could play so well. That was amazing. Did you hear how everyone clapped? The praise came pouring in, making Charlotte blush. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, let alone being the center of admiration. Charlotte stammered, giving a weak smile. I just do what I love. The restaurant manager, a strict but fair middle-aged woman, approached, her eyes sparkling with rare admiration. Charlotte, she said, her voice calm yet filled with emotion. I've worked here for over 20 years. But this is the first time I've seen someone change the atmosphere of this restaurant with just a piece of music. Charlotte bowed her head, her heart filled with gratitude. As the guests began to leave, they didn't forget to offer appreciative glances and generous tips. When Charlotte counted the tips at the end of her shift, she could hardly believe her eyes. Tonight, she had received 3 times her usual amount. Some guests had left large bills with small notes attached. Thank you for the wonderful music. A true talent shouldn't be forgotten. Keep chasing your dream. Charlotte clutched the bills tightly in her hands. They weren't just pieces of paper, they were recognition, encouragement, a reminder that she wasn't invisible, that her talent had value. And, more importantly, they gave her a chance to continue studying piano, to pursue the dream she had once thought she had to give up. As she stepped out of the restaurant at the end of her shift, Charlotte looked up at the night sky. The twinkling stars reflected in her eyes, as if they were smiling at her. She had stood her ground. She had not let Adrian defeat her. And tonight, She didn't just leave with a lighter heart but with renewed hope for the future. The news of Charlotte's emotional performance at LaFontaine spread faster than she could have imagined. Her video, with her fingers gently gliding over the piano keys, was quickly shared and garnered tens of thousands of views within just a few days. The comments poured in, each filled with admiration. "Oh my God! Isn't she a professional artist? This is incredible. Such amazing musicality. How can someone with this kind of talent be a waitress? Someone please help her pursue her dreams." Charlotte didn't know about the newfound fame until one of her coworkers, an enthusiastic young woman, held up her phone in front of her. "Charlotte, you're going viral." Charlotte looked at the screen, stunned to see herself in the video, her fingers dancing across the keys, each note filled with the emotions of her heart. She couldn't believe that her performance had reached so many people. It's just a video. She tried to keep her expectations in check, even though her heart was racing. 2 days later, still reeling from the surprise, a call came that made everything feel clearer. "Hello. Is this Charlotte Hayes?" "Yes, this is she. I'm Mark Whitmore, a music producer in Nashville. I happened to see the video of your performance, and I was really impressed. I think you have potential. If you're interested, I'd like to invite you to Nashville to record a demo." Charlotte almost couldn't breathe. A music producer? In Nashville? She repeated the words in her head, not quite able to believe it. She gripped the phone tightly, her hands trembling. This was an opportunity she'd never dared to dream of. "I'm honored, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, her voice tinged with emotion, but trying to stay calm. "But, I'm not sure I can leave my job here." Mark laughed gently through the phone, his voice soothing and full of reassurance. "I'm not asking you to give everything up. I just want you to consider this as a step forward. If you're willing, I'll cover the travel expenses. Just come to Nashville, get into the studio, and let your music speak for itself." Charlotte took a deep breath, her heart racing. She looked around at the simple life she had, and realized that this wasn't a far-off dream. This was a real opportunity, a chance to make her dream a reality. Even though the future remained uncertain. "I'll go," she said it with newfound determination, a confidence she had never known before. This was the step she needed to take, and she couldn't let this opportunity slip by. As Charlotte stood on the stage, the soft golden lights illuminated every feature of her face, and her heart no longer raced like it had before. No more trembling or anxiety under the gaze of others, only confidence. Steadfast like a piano being played by strong hands. Each note she played was a declaration of her inner strength. She was not just an artist on this stage, she was the woman who had rediscovered herself. Charlotte thought back to the hard days when she had lived in the shadow of judgment, when her self-belief had been eroded by mockery, silence, and neglect. But today, standing here on this stage, she knew that everything she had been through was only a stepping stone for her rise. She was no longer afraid of others' judgments, because she had realized one important thing: her ability to bounce back. Her resilience and her talent were what defined her, not the words or opinions from the outside world. Charlotte smiled as the applause echoed from the audience, but she didn't feel it as validation from others about her worth. She had affirmed that worth herself through all the struggles. From the long, tiring nights in the restaurant to this moment, every step had been a victory. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but now, nothing could stop her, because she was no longer the girl who feared or worried about what others thought. She was the one who decided her own fate, and she would not let anyone or anything define her dreams. Through this story, we want to send a powerful message: don't let fear or others' judgments hold you back. Because you have the strength to overcome everything. Believe in your talent, your ability to bounce back. Pursue your dreams, face adversity, and remember that you are the only one who defines your worth. In the end, success doesn't come from the approval of others, but from the perseverance and passion within you. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future content. And most importantly, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. What was your favorite part? Is there anything you'd like to see in the next video? Let's chat. See you in the next one.